Today, we are breaking down what is honestly the ultimate wealth building machine. Specifically, we're going to look at how young professionals, yes, even those starting from absolutely zero, can build massive, life-changing wealth using the S&P 500. Now, if you've got literally zero investing experience, but you do have a bit of time on your side, well, you are in exactly the right place. Okay, let's dive into this because this story is just wild. Back in 1980, there was a guy named Ronald Reed. He worked as a school janitor and a gas station attendant up in Vermont. He drove a modest used car, wore the exact same jacket for years, and, everyone just assumed he was barely scraping by. But when Ronald passed away in 2014 at 92 years old, he left behind an $8 million fortune. And he didn't leave it to some massive corporate empire. He gave the whole shebang to his local library and hospital. So the obvious question here is how? How does a janitor earning a modest minimum wage salary with absolutely no Wall Street connections amass $8 million? Well, he didn't win the lottery. He definitely didn't inherit a fancy trust fund. He just did one incredibly boring but totally brilliant thing consistently for his entire life. He harnessed the power of the S&P 500. Which brings us to Section 1, the magic wand, understanding the S&P 500. Let's break this down into plain English. The S&P 500, which stands for Standard & Poor's 500, created back in 1957, is essentially just a list. It's a list of the 500 largest publicly traded companies in the United States. We're talking the absolute heavyweights here, folks. Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Johnson & Johnson. But it's also a measurement of how those 500 companies are doing collectively. And here's the absolute kicker. Since its inception, it has returned an average of about 10% per year. I mean, that is utterly crushing the typical 3 to 4% you might be lucky to get in a standard high-yield savings account right now.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core concept. You see, you don't need to hire some fancy, expensive stockbroker to buy into these 500 companies one by one. You can buy what's called an index fund, which is a single investment that just tracks the entire S&P 500 automatically. So instead of risking all your hard-earned money betting on one horse to win the race, it's like you simply own a little tiny piece of every single horse.
Moving right along to Section 2, the math that builds wealth. Okay, now that we know what the S&P 500 actually is, let's look at the underlying math that makes the strategy work for absolutely anyone who has time on their side. Now, compound interest, that is really the secret sauce here. Let's say you take a single lump sum of $10,000, put it into the S&P 500, and literally never touch it again. At a 10% average annual return, after 10 years, you've got almost $26,000. After 20 years, over $67,000. Give it 30 years and it balloons to $174,000. And after 40 years, we are talking nearly $500,000, $452,593 to be exact. And remember, you didn't do a single ounce of extra work. You just waited. So the crucial point is what happens when you start adding monthly contributions to the mix. Depending on your current income level, hey, maybe you start small, just $100 a month. By age 65, you've built up over $600,000. But let's say as your career grows, you scale that up to $500 a month, bam, you're looking at over $3.1 million by retirement. Think about that. Out of your own pocket, you only contributed $240,000 over those 40 years. The market did the rest of the heavy lifting. Starting small absolutely works, but consistency, that's what creates phenomenal, life-altering wealth. All right, Section 3, real stories of ordinary millionaires. Statistics are great and all, but real-world proof shows us that this isn't just some theoretical math trick. Ronald Reed wasn't an isolated fluke. Take Sylvia Bloom, for instance. She was a third-grade teacher and later a legal secretary. She quietly just mirrored the investments of the wealthy lawyers she worked for, making steady, consistent contributions over decades. When she passed away, her estate was worth $9 million. No way, right? Then there's Grace Groner, another secretary. She bought 3 $180 shares of Abbott stock way back during the Great Depression. She never sold a single share, just reinvested her dividends, and 75 years later, those 3 little shares had grown to $7 million. Their big secret? It wasn't genius-level intellect. It was simply time in the market. Let's turn to Section 4, surviving the monster, inevitable market crashes. Look, we have to acknowledge the elephant in the room, the major conflict in investing, market fear. Because the S&P 500 does not go straight up in a pretty line. It crashes. And man, those crashes are terrifying. But if we're going to succeed here, we have to completely reframe our understanding of these downturns.
Let's move to the historical timeline and see how this actually builds. We have survived some terrifying wipeouts. There was the dot-com crash in 2000 where the market plummeted 49%, the 2008 financial crisis, it dropped 57%, and of course, the COVID crash in March 2020, literally the fastest bear market in history, falling 34% in just 33 days. But look really closely at the big picture. After every single one of these terrifying crashes, the market eventually recovered and went on to set new all-time highs every single time. Let's make this super real with a quick comparison. Imagine we have two people, Tom and Sarah. They both invest $10,000 right before the 2008 crash. Now, Tom, he panics when the market plummets in 2009. He sells everything, locks in his losses, and decides to just wait for things to calm down before getting back in a few years later. Fast forward to 2024, Tom's sitting on about $28,000. Sarah, on the other hand, she ignores her account completely, doesn't even log in, she does absolutely nothing. By 2024, her account is worth over $75,000. They had the exact same starting amount, but wildly different outcomes purely because Sarah had the guts not to panic.
The legendary Warren Buffett really summed this up perfectly. He said the stock market is a device for transferring money from the impatient to the patient. It's so true. Surviving market crashes is not some intellectual test of timing the market perfectly. It is purely a psychological test of your patience. Which leads us perfectly into Section 5, the practical toolkit, how to actually start. All right, let's pivot away from the theory to some immediate practical action. How do you actually go out and do this? If you're a young professional listening right now, where exactly should you put your money today? Well, here are the 3 most common vehicles to access the S&P 500. Number 1, your 401k at work. Now listen, if your employer offers a match, that is literal free money. It's a 100% instant return on your investment. So that is always your ultimate first step. Number 2 is a Roth IRA, which gives you incredible tax-free growth. And number 3 is a standard taxable brokerage account, where you can easily buy popular, low-cost index funds like VOO or SPY. Let's look at a really clear step-by-step checklist for setting up that Roth IRA, because honestly, it is arguably the most powerful tool in your entire wealth-building arsenal. Step 1, open an account at a reputable broker like Fidelity, Vanguard, or Schwab. Super easy. Step 2, contribute up to the annual limit, which for 2024 is $7,000. Step 3, use that cash sitting in the account to actually buy an S&P 500 index fund. Don't forget that last part. And the massive, unbelievable advantage here, every single dime of growth over the next 40 years is completely 100% tax-free when you go to retire. It's almost like a legal cheat code. Now, what's really interesting to consider next is the silent killer of wealth, which is fees. Low-cost index funds, again, whether you use Vanguard, Fidelity, or Schwab, they charge you almost nothing. We're talking around 0.04% per year. On the flip side, actively managed funds, they might charge you a full 1.00% or more. Now, I know what you're thinking. 1%? That sounds like a tiny difference. But trust me, over 40 years of compounding, that 1% fee difference is a silent killer. It will literally eat hundreds of thousands of dollars of your potential future wealth. So, moral of the story, always stick to the low-cost index funds. Okay, Section 6, overcoming your investing fears. So the math is crystal clear, the tools are super accessible, and the fees are practically zero. So why doesn't everyone just do this? Well, it all comes down to human psychology holding people back. Here are the 3 most common mistakes and barriers. Number 1, waiting for the quote-unquote right time because the market feels scary. Newsflash, guys, it always feels scary. There's always some crisis on the news. Number 2, thinking you just don't have enough money to even start. But with fractional shares today, you can literally start investing with a few dollars. And number 3, procrastination disguised as research. Saying you need to understand it better before you put a single dollar in. The ultimate antidote to all of these fears? Just starting. Today. And honestly, the best possible way to start is by utilizing a strategy called dollar cost averaging. It sounds fancy, but it simply means you invest a fixed dollar amount every single month, totally ignoring whatever the market or the crazy news cycle is doing. When prices are high, your fixed amount buys a few less shares. When the market crashes and everything's on sale, that exact same amount automatically buys you more shares. To make sure you actually stick with it, set up a simple calendar reminder on your phone, or hey, even print out a visual habit tracker and stick it on your fridge so you can physically check off that monthly contribution. It totally removes all the emotion, it mimics that relentless consistency we saw with Ronald Reed, and it guarantees that you are always in the game.